Jansen Harris here with the Flying High podcast. Joining me is Mike Conti from 92.9 The Game. Mike, what's up, man?
Hey, Jansen. That's a heck of an open, by the way. I enjoyed that.
Thanks. I probably should make it longer, but hey, we'll roll with it. It's a Monday. It's a Monday. Mike, the Falcons, they're 0-2. They lost 37-17. You know how social media is and fan bases. Everything is just one game. What's going on? Is there any concern in your eyes with the Falcons team right now?
No, not really. There's not a lot to be optimistic about either because we haven't really seen any reason to be optimistic. But it's really easy, I think, as you said, Jansen, to overreact to a small sample size when the only thing that we've been able to watch is training camp practices. And 2 preseason games in which the starters haven't played. I wasn't down in Miami last week when these joint practices were being held, so I have to rely on the dispatches from D-Led, who I trust, and some of the other people who are watching. It sounded like the Falcons' first-teamers were at least holding their own, if not outplaying the Dolphins' first-teamers. But again, that's in a practice setting. And it's different when you actually play a competitive game. So I don't want to overreact too far to the positive, but I don't want to overreact too far to the negative either. I think if we've learned one thing, Jansen, it's that the Falcons' backups might not be as good as the Dolphins and Titans' backups, for whatever that's worth.
Absolutely. I seen there's a viral video of Calvin Ridley on Xavier Howard just doing it up real big. But again, people say it's practice. Calvin Ridley is expected to take that next step. Do you expect, let's go to those backups real quick. QB2, the AJ McCarron, unfortunately, he's out for the season with the ACL. He wasn't playing well before that. You got Felipe Franks, who he made a couple plays with his legs. He's still young. Is there a need for the Falcons to go out there and get another quarterback in the next couple of days? Do you see them doing that?
Yeah, I do see them doing it, but I don't think it's going to be a big splash. Like I know I posted on Twitter the other day the list of free agent quarterbacks that are available right now, and some people saw Alex Smith's name on there, Robert Griffin III's name on there, and they say, well, that's who the Falcons need to go get as a backup quarterback. Well, Alex Smith is probably retired. Robert Griffin III is going to make more money with ESPN. And quite frankly, you're talking about a backup quarterback where you still are a little bit constrained financially as the Falcons. So I do think they need to bring in a third quarterback just for depth purposes, but I don't think it's going to end up being anything splashy. Think along the lines of a Kurt Benkert type quarterback. I think that would be the move they need to make. I'm a little bit optimistic about what I've seen from Felipe Franks so far. I don't think he's been that bad. Like you said, Jansen, he can make some plays with his legs. So he gives you a little bit of a different look at the quarterback position. I think, long story short, if Matt Ryan were to get hurt, the Falcons would be in big trouble this year. But I don't think they would be in any more trouble with Felipe Franks as the backup quarterback compared to, say, Alex Smith or a Blake Bortles or even Jamie Newman, who would be available as a free agent.
Now, Mike, when we look even at these preseason games, I'm pretty critical sometimes on quarterbacks, quarterback league, and everything like that. Do you think a lot of maybe the lack of passing game so far in the preseason has been because of the offensive line and it kind of being a mess? Do you blame it mostly on the O-line, especially with Felipe Franks? I know you've seen some good things out of him, you were just saying, but do you think a lot of that has to do with the protection?
I mean, it might to a degree, and I don't disagree with you that the protection has looked iffy, but I just think in general, and we don't know a whole lot about Arthur Smith and his philosophy, but I think in general, offensive scheme is very, very vanilla in preseason games. I don't think the Falcons want to do anything in a preseason game that, A, would telegraph what they're going to do in the regular season, and B, put those backup quarterbacks like McCarron and Franks in a bad position. So I think more than anything else, this goes back to what I said at the top. You don't want to overreact too much to early preseason games where the starters are not playing because the scheme is so vanilla. Maybe Sunday against Cleveland with Matt Ryan playing and Calvin Ridley playing and Kyle Pitts playing, we could see them open things up a little bit more from a scheme standpoint. But so far, I'm going to try to just assume that it is more scheme related and less protection related. But you are right. There are definitely some concerns in that degree from what we've seen in the first two games.
How did you feel about the running game a little bit? The 187 on the ground, I was pleased with that. They featured a lot of running backs. I think that was a good little, I guess, takeaway from the game. I know there was a lot of bad. I know the defense was collapsing and people were kind of going crazy about that. But how did you feel about that running game? Do you think we'll see more of that type of momentum into the next preseason game, into the regular season? I know Mike Davis is the starter, but maybe that backup role, they'll find like some success there. Were you pleased with that?
Yeah, I was. Now, again, scheme, you're going to be vanilla in preseason games. You're going to lean heavily towards the run. You're not trying to win a game when you're down by 20 points in the fourth quarter. You're going to run out the clock and go home. So, again, a lot of it does have to do with scheme. But, again, you're right. And, look, Arthur Smith at Tennessee, granted with Derrick Henry, really was a run-heavy offense, really leaned on that running game. The best offenses in this league are the offenses that can run the ball and achieve balance. So I think Arthur Smith is going to have a commitment to the run just based on what he did at Tennessee, not based on anything that has happened in these preseason games. If they can execute, and the execution starts up front, obviously, with the blocking, but then it goes on Mike Davis and Quadri Ollison, who I'm optimistic can have a productive year. I think the Falcons would be able to achieve some balance, and hopefully that would be consistent. The more balanced the Falcons are, I think the easier it's going to be to protect Matt Ryan, because defenses are going to have to play the Falcons a little bit less aggressively from a blitzing standpoint.
Speaking of Matt Ryan and the quarterback position, always a hot button, specifically here in Atlanta as well, too. Do you see Arthur Smith helping Matt Ryan get back to that 2016-ish, the way he was playing when he won the MVP?
Yeah, it's a good question. MVP level and high level are two very different things, right, Jansen? And I think that Matt Ryan absolutely is still playing at a high level and is capable of playing at a very high level in 2021. Can he play at an MVP level? I think so often to be a league MVP, it's dependent on how good your team is and what your statistics are. Matt Ryan could have a good year, but it might not compare to what he did in 2016 because, say, the Falcons are a little more dependent on the run. Well, that's going to affect Matt Ryan's passing numbers. It'll probably affect his touchdowns. It might affect his completion percentage. A lot of that MVP level goes to, your statistics and how many yards you're throwing for, how many touchdowns you have. On top of it, you don't have Julio Jones anymore, so the personnel has changed. So I think Matt can still play at a level high enough where he can win games for the Atlanta Falcons. He can have a good year. He can have a Pro Bowl caliber year. To be an MVP, I don't know if the team around him is good enough to put him in that position. I don't know if the Falcons are good enough to be an 11 or 12 win team this year, which is probably what they would need to be for Matt Ryan to be in the MVP conversation.
Do you think Matt Ryan receives too much criticism from the fans, or do you just believe it'll be any city with any quarterback? If the team isn't winning, they're going to get most of the blame. If they start winning, then they'll get most of the credit. Do you think it's a quarterback thing, or do you think it's just, okay, here in Atlanta, maybe we're ungrateful, or sometimes maybe guys like me are too critical of Matt Ryan?
No, I wouldn't say ungrateful. Look, the quarterback is going to be the lightning rod for criticism in all 32 NFL cities, right? So, look, is Matt playing at the same level that he was playing at in 2016? Probably not. I mean, there's probably been a tiny bit of a decline from that level, but again, that was MVP level. I still think he's got enough in the gas tank to be an excellent quarterback for a few more years for the Atlanta Falcons. I can't tell anyone how they're supposed to feel, in their heart. I don't get the license to say you're wrong for feeling that way. It'd be like that in anything, not just sports and in relationships and life. Like, I don't get to tell people how they feel. People feel a certain way emotionally because of what they see and how they process things. I think Matt Ryan's been an excellent quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. I think sometimes he's been blamed for things he's not at fault for, but I grew up as a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I could say the same thing for Randall Cunningham. I think he got blamed for a lot of things that weren't necessarily his fault.
Eagles fans are brutal.
They are. Yeah, but way more brutal than Falcons fans. Phil Simms won a Super Bowl for the New York Giants, and everyone was ready to run him out of town because Jeff Hostetler had a good year when Phil Simms got here. I mean, it's just it's the way it goes for a quarterback in the NFL. I don't think it bothers Matt Ryan at all. I think he tunes that noise out. But I can't sit here and say that anyone is correct or incorrect for feeling the way they do. You feel the way you do because that's how each individual processes what's in front of them. I think Matt's been a great quarterback. I think he's been a great ambassador for the team. I think, he's played at an extremely high level for a long time. And I have nothing but positive things to say about Matt Ryan. That does not mean, though, that those who criticize Matt Ryan are necessarily wrong. I just look at it through a different prism.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Jansen Harris here with the Flying High podcast, joined by Mike Conti, 92.9 The Game. We're presented by the Level 1 Game Room and Y'all Sox. Mike, last season, Dante Fowler Jr., he was expected to do a lot. He was really confident speaking in the preseason and prior to him getting signed to the Falcons. Didn't really produce as much. He was saying he was injured. Some people, they don't really think that. What's your expectations for him coming into this season?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because there's a new defensive coordinator now. And it seems like Dean Pease, a lot of what he is going to do this year is going to be predicated on pressure. So a Dante Fowler becomes really, really important. What do I expect from him? If he stays healthy, I think he can be a very effective player. But I think for everyone on the Atlanta Falcons defense, Jansen, not just Dante Fowler, so much of their level of production this year is going to be predicated on what the offense does. I think one of the things that really hurt Dante Fowler and a lot of other players on the Falcons defense last year, you look at the time of possession numbers, especially in the second half of games where the Falcons were leading last year, especially under Dan Quinn before he was fired, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. That Falcons defense is on the field for 20 minutes in the second half, 40 minutes in a game. So that's an unsustainable amount of time that a defensive player has to play, especially when you're probably going to be a 2 or 3 down player like Dante Fowler. So I think a lot of it just has to do with the offense being able to sustain drives. I think that would go a long way to helping Dante Fowler. I think he's a nice player. I really do. And I think in a Dean Pease defense where he's going to send pressure at the quarterback, Dante Fowler could potentially have a very big year.
We talked last time about Kyle Pitts. Everybody's talking about Kyle Pitts. How about Richie Grant? What should we expect from the rookie safety? Year one, Dean Pease, new system with the Falcons. They're trying to reinvent this defense pretty bad the last couple seasons. But what do you expect from Richie Grant this year?
Yeah, again, another good question. I think for all the rookies, we don't really know yet because, again, it's a new system with a new defensive coordinator. Falcons went out and they got Eric Harris and Daron Harmon. They have Jalen Hawkins, who they drafted last year. TJ Green is in this mix. Richie Grant's going to be in this mix. I'm rooting for him. He's a really personable guy. I love listening to him talk. I think he's got a great positive attitude and a nose for the football. I think just like everything else, Jansen, this is going to evolve, and let's think about the conversations we were having this time last year without the benefit of seeing any preseason games and all the guesses that we were having to make on depth charts and things like that. Like, how much is Darqueze Dennard going to play? We didn't really know until we got into like week 4, 5, 6 of the season. I think it's going to be the same for Richie Grant. He's someone who, for one, as a rookie, he's going to have to earn that playing time with the way he practices. But I wouldn't draw any conclusions on what this depth chart is going to look like going into the Philadelphia game week 1 because everything evolves because of injuries and because of the way that guys are playing. But one thing is for sure, like I said, I'm rooting for him because I think he's a great interview. I want to talk to him a lot.
I hear you on that, Mike. Mike, you've seen this team practice, and obviously it's going to be different from the games, but does this feel like a Falcons team that realistically could make the playoffs? Because there was a lot in the media saying, win now, we're not looking to rebuild. From what you just see from them practicing, the energy level, can you see this team making the playoffs this year?
Yeah, and just for full disclosure, I have not seen them practice in person.
You haven't seen them practice?
Just for
Okay.
full disclosure, I've been tied up with Atlanta United, so I've not been able to go up to Flowery Branch. I can only go by what Jarvis and Tanitra are telling me and the videos I see, which I think is still enough. I trust Jarvis and Tanitra to be my eyes. It's fine. Are they good enough to be a playoff team? Yeah, maybe. I'm certainly not going to put them among the favorites in the NFC. When you expand the playoffs, as the NFL has done, now it does kind of open the door for a team that might be 10-7, maybe even 9-8 to sneak in there. I think the division this year is a little bit easier than it was last year. I still think Tampa Bay is elite. It's going to be very hard to beat the Buccaneers twice. I think New Orleans takes a major, major step back, and I'm not yet a believer in what Carolina has done. So, can the Falcons go 4-2 in their division? That would give them a chance right there. That would put them in the playoff mix. I hate the fact that they're playing 10 games away from Atlanta. Even if one of them is a neutral site game against the woeful Jets, I just don't like the fact that they have to play 10 games away from Atlanta. It's going to give them a competitive disadvantage in trying to get to that 9th win or their 10th win where they would need to go to the playoffs. For me, if this team can go 9-8 or better, I think that's a success. Whether or not they make the playoffs, obviously you play to win the game. You're all in it to win the Super Bowl. But looking at it realistically, I think if this team has a winning record, that is a big jump forward. I think they can get there. I think they can get to 9-8. Anything beyond that to go to the playoffs, I don't know. And I don't think we're going to know until we see them play meaningful games. And unfortunately, that won't be until September 13th.
Good stuff, Mike. Mike, any advice to any broadcasters out here? You've been doing things. I always tell people I work with all the time. I feel like Mike Conti, he does things on a high level. He could do anything. He could do anything in the broadcasting game, in my opinion. What advice would you give, not even just young guys out here, anybody in the sports broadcasting game?
Well, that's nice of you to say. Thank you. I don't know if I share your opinion, but it's nice of you to say. Thank you. Honestly, my advice is to do a lot of what you're doing, Jansen. I think we're in a time and place right now in sports broadcasting where everyone can have a platform, and I think that's really, really exciting. The best thing that an aspiring sportscaster can do is to create their own platform and get as many reps as possible. If you want to be a show host, the podcasting that you're doing, Jansen, is an excellent idea. If you want to call play-by-play, which is really my passion, there are high schools all over the place in this region, across the state, across the country, who need play-by-play announcers because so many of their games are being streamed right now. And it's not just the glamour sports, football and basketball, it's all the Olympic sports too. You can really become a well-rounded play-by-play broadcaster if you work on a sport that maybe you're not familiar with. It'll help you develop the skills to describe movements in different ways. And it definitely will teach you how to prepare properly for a broadcast. So create your own platform and never say no to an opportunity to work. I think any opportunity a young broadcaster gets to work is very, very important because you can't grow if you aren't working. So I would say, Jansen, a lot of people really need to look at you and what you're doing in creating this platform for yourself. And I'm guessing you would probably feel that you have gotten a lot better from your first show to right now, because it is all about getting the reps. But, create your own platform, be confident, never be afraid to ask for help either. I think there are a lot of people in our industry, myself included, who are very, very willing to help younger people get started because we're paying it forward. We got a lot of help when we got started too.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I would look at, and I still talk to him, Paul Crane. I was looking at a lot of stuff you guys were doing. Like, wow, let me go on their website. Let me be open to seeing what guys before me were doing, and let me try to take some of their game and try to maybe do it my way. So definitely, you're right about that. It's just, I guess, being open-minded and saying, hey, instead of just shutting this down, be open to take any opportunity. So great stuff, Mike. I appreciate you joining me. Mike Conti, 929 The Game. This is Jansen Harris, the Flying High podcast. Were presented by Ya Sox and also the Level 1 Game Room. Thank you, Mike, for joining me.
You bet.
It.